Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep the Mining podcast. And today's guest is Matt Jackson, who's COO of Akobo Minerals, a gold exploration and mining company focusing on projects in southwestern Ethiopia, a prolific area with extensive gold production. Matt's a geologist by background with experience in advising mining and investment companies. He has managed exploration programs and managed all stages of investment in mining. His commodity experience extends to copper, lead, zinc, silver, gold, iron ore, industrial minerals, and rare earth elements. So he's well placed to take Akobo Minerals forward and will let us know more about the company and also mining in Ethiopia. So that's welcome, Matt, to the podcast. How you doing, Matt?
I'm great, thanks. Thanks a lot for having me. And this is going to be fun. I'm enjoying it already.
Yeah, and I appreciate your time. And I'm actually recording on a bank holiday Monday here in the UK. So, and you mentioned obviously your holiday was yesterday.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting, comparison between Norway and the UK. Scandinavia does holidays slightly differently.
Yeah. So. I wonder if you can tell our audience a little bit about yourself, about your background in your career, and then we can go into questions around Akobo Minerals and mining in Ethiopia. So I wonder if you can tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I'm British and recently got a dual citizenship with Norway. We've lived here for some time now. I'm a sort of quite a weird feature in Norway because I'm an exploration geologist and an economic geologist, and mining is a relatively small industry in this country. But I grew up in the UK and I did a PhD at Cardiff University with Hazel Pritchard back in the day. And my PhD was in fact studying mineral exploration in Ethiopia, in Western Ethiopia, a few hundred kilometers north from where Akobo operates now. So I did the PhD and did a bit of research work after that. And then this was the boom time for exploration and geology. So I left and I started doing consulting work. And I worked on and off for companies like SRK as an associate and various other junior mining companies. I did a number of years traveling around the world, and really I was cutting my teeth at that point, getting to know the industry, and I got a lot of great experience, seeing a lot of projects all over the world. So that was a lot of fun. Then in 2009, when the crisis hit, I decided it was time to, get some experience with a bigger firm. And I went to Australia, lived in Perth, worked for BHP Billiton Iron Ore. And I guess some of the guys listening to this might have worked with me back then. And I spent a number of years there working as a geochemist, running the QA/QC programs with some very talented people in the company back then. That was an awful lot of fun. I made some great friends there, and there's almost like an alumni of BHP people that I still know and even work with now from that time. We were running, that was a huge exploration program, big management team. And I was a technical guy back then, advising on the geochem side and the QA/QC side, and training, a lot of geologists in how to do their work and reviewing, the exploration programs essentially. So that was great fun. And I was living there with my wife, and, we decided to start a family, and Norway was the place to do it. So we'd actually lived in Norway before we went to Australia, and we came back here. And so I took a job with Golder Associates and went into, back into, one of these big consulting firms, doing mining consulting from there. And again, that was great. When I speak to other ex-consultants, they often say things like, I've been a consultant, so I've seen the good and the bad and the ugly. And, I have seen the good and the bad and the ugly through the consulting side. I spent a number of years with Golder, and then moved into working for a family office looking at investment analysis based on my knowledge of the good and the bad and the ugly. And so then at that point, from after my BHP time onwards, I was, working more towards the sort of, working with executives, advising executives on how to invest in firms and how to spend their money essentially. I did more of that after Golder, working with Bluestone Group, and that was great. And we're going to be talking about Ethiopia here. I would say about half of my career has been Africa based, and the rest of it has been in various other parts of the world. So I'm a bit of a fan of mining and exploration in Africa, and I'm also quite a fan of mining and exploration in Ethiopia specifically, because a large part of my heart lives in Ethiopia essentially because of my PhD work done there. And I also did some consulting work on and off in Ethiopia. So my career has come in and out of Ethiopia essentially. And now, taking the job with Akobo a few years ago, I saw a really fantastic opportunity to expand my career in Ethiopia and do something great with Akobo. I wrote the first competent persons report for the project itself back in 2019, and that was before we made the Bonanza gold discoveries. Once the discoveries were made, it was just a fantastic time to come and work with a wonderful team in a fantastic country and really develop a project. So that's a very brief background to me.
Yeah. One question I was going to ask: someone being British and has a project in Ethiopia, what was the attraction to live in Norway? I mean, I've interviewed a few guests that are living in Norway, but that's because they've got a project in Scandinavia. Yeah. But I suppose what's the attraction for you and your family living in Norway?
It's a wonderful place to bring up kids, to be honest. When it comes to the industry side, it's a fascinating place to work. Norway itself is quite unexplored. To be honest, only a relatively small amount of my career has been done here. I've done a few investment reviews of various projects, but the mining industry has been sort of vastly overshadowed by the oil industry for many years. We may be seeing a growth now in the mining industry in this country. But the interesting, something which is absolutely fascinating for me is, working for a Norwegian company. We're very, very small in Norway with Scandinavian ethics in Ethiopia. That's a fascinating sort of comparison to make, and it's a fascinating dynamic to the company as a result of that. So it's I'm one of few mining people who live and work in Norway. There's a small community of us. Yeah.
Yeah. So just wondering if you can just tell us more about Akobo Minerals. Just give us an overview of the company.
Sure. So Akobo Minerals and our subsidiary Etno in Ethiopia have actually been operating for a long time. Etno itself was established in Ethiopia in the late 90s, back in a time when they weren't even looking at mining. And the term Etno is Ethiopia, Norway. In 2008, some of the old geological survey guys from Ethiopia who had spent their lives exploring the entire country set up Etno with funding from Norway, or they changed the purpose of Etno to mining essentially. And they picked up the licenses in the area we're still working in now in 2008. And there was a small project working on alluvial mining there that had limited success for a few years. And then a strategic decision was made in around about 2012 to move to hard rock exploration. And that decision was actually made by or alongside our current CEO, Jørgen Evjen, who has been with the company for a long time, as a founding investor, in fact, and running it as a side project essentially to his main job. So in 2012, the process started essentially for hard rock exploration. And back then, it took 4 days to travel from Addis Ababa to our site. It now takes a day and a half by road, or 2 hours if you fly to our airstrip. So this was a very, very different place back then. Akobo was operating in an extremely remote area where there was a little bit of artisanal mining going on, a little bit of panning, and very, very little activity. It was highly undeveloped. And our geologists there, were working with very, very little money, to be honest, and, diligently exploring over many years. That's from 2012 to 2018. In fact, they were working with, reasonable funding from Norway, but, this was a very small company, less than 10 people and 2 geologists. And then there was a small RC drilling campaign put in place, which was not especially successful. And that was a real point. This was before I was involved with the company. That was a real point at which I think that some of the investors had a bit of a wobble, and they've been putting money into the company for a long time. As I'll explain later, in fact, they were very, very committed socially to this company. The Norwegian investors, many of them based in Trondheim, are very caring people. In fact, they're investing in order to develop a good business and increase the value of the company, but also they really care about the people. And that point in 2018, when the RC drilling campaign was less than successful, there was some difficult times, I think. But then I came along and wrote the competent persons report, and that wasn't necessarily a turnaround point for the company. But what shortly after that, there was some diamond drilling that they brought in a Norwegian drilling company to do the diamond drilling at the site, and this Norwegian company actually took payment in shares, and they hit bonanza grade gold. There was some of the samples that were taken out in those first successful holes were 10,000 grams per ton. Such high values of gold that it was difficult to analyze. And there was a proper discovery moment where the geologists at the site were, taking out this core that you could see the gold very, very clearly in it. And that was, I wasn't there at the time, and but our staff that's still with us now, Johan Heiberg, our chief exploration manager, was there. And the work done by those guys was really turned the company around, and that's the point at which everything changed from accelerating at a low level to really ramping up very fast. So that's a little bit of where we came from, and obviously after that there was a lot of resource drilling done, and we've done a scoping study. We've got very, very qualified, very well qualified engineers involved with the project, and now we're moving towards production. Yeah.
And just recently, you had some impressive grades. What does that mean for Akobo Minerals and your future plans?
Yes. So our, I mentioned the bonanza grades that we hit in those first holes. Those have continued. In fact, we've drilled over 15,000 meters now at this particular project, which is a relatively small amount of meters for a project that's going into production. But because the grades are so high, the actual amount of the number of holes that we need is relatively low to make an economic project. The grades. So we released a resource estimate update very, very recently, and the overall the resource size is 68,000 tons at 22 grams per ton. And I mean, obviously, a lot of your listeners are very familiar with the industry, and they'll understand that 22 grams per ton indicated and inferred is quite a huge grade, in fact. But for anyone that's not familiar with gold, typically a high grade resource in underground mining might be something like between 6 and 8 grams per ton, and we have 22 grams per ton over the whole project. And in our indicated resources, we actually have a grade of 40 grams per ton, and that's relatively shallow. And that's what that means is we're talking about a relatively small amount of gold in comparison to most mining projects around the world, the actual number of ounces. But the grade itself means that a cash flow model for our project looks very different to many other projects, many other gold projects. The concentrations of gold, the grade that we have is, in many cases 3 times higher than most underground mining projects. And when the grade goes up, the amount of ore that needs to be mined to extract 1 ounce of gold is a lot less. And of course, the revenues are higher as well. So we can bring, so in actual fact, we have 40 grams per ton quite close to the surface that can be accessed within a number of months of starting the underground mining. And that means that essentially the cash flow, it should be relatively early in the project. Now, I'm not going to jinx myself by saying we're going to get early cash flow, but it will come, earlier on than most projects. Inevitably we're going to be looking at dealing with the normal challenges you have with underground mining. But essentially, this is a small project with very high grades. And our ESG consultant, Catherine McCallan, in fact, she's our head of ESG, she's employed by us now. She came up with the term boutique mining. In the same way as you can go and stay at the Hilton or Holiday Inn if you want to, and you have a perfectly good stay there. You could also go and choose the boutique mining that's a few streets down, and it's a very nice stay. It's much smaller, and often in many cases, a boutique hotel might have a better carbon footprint, for example, and a better sort of environmental and social impact than the large hotel. So in the same way, we're calling it boutique mining because our ESG program is very, very strong for this. And because it's small and it's underground, our impact on the environment is much, much less. So that's, we started to call it boutique mining. And essentially the grade enables, fantastic cash flow, but also it means that the ESG side is much more feasible for us to do, a really fantastic project from that perspective.
Akobo was nominated for ESG Miner Developer of the Year at the Mines and Money back in December. How does the company view the value of ESG and what are your plans moving forward?
Yeah, so I'm really glad you asked that question. We were, utterly delighted to have been nominated for that award, to be honest. We didn't win it, which is a shame, but the company which won it had been around for many more years than us and had a much more established program than us. So we were absolutely delighted just to be nominated for that award. And essentially, I mentioned earlier that until a few years ago, the area that we're working in was more or less pristine. There were reports of large fauna and so on, large animals being in the area. And so essentially, a lot of ESG problems in many companies come not from the company that is actually operating, that we're talking about. It comes from the actions of previous companies. So because we haven't been affected by the actions of previous companies, we're in a position to sort of start fresh with our ESG program. And it's part of the reason why Catherine was so excited to come and do this work with us. So what we're calling our Sustainable Natural Resources Management Plan is quite groundbreaking. It's actually, we're obviously investing some money into this, but the actual investment that is required from us is, not huge amounts of money, to be honest. And what we're able to achieve is, for example, developing alternative livelihoods for the people that are nearby. When the mine opens, they will be employed to do the various work that's needed. But in addition to that, while we're developing the mine, we'll also develop alternative livelihoods. And there has, in the last few years, 2 or 3 or 4 years, there's been a lot of artisanal mining, and that has caused some damage to ecosystems. And so we're actually putting in place a system called a Payment for Ecosystem Services scheme, which is where we initiate the project for the local people to run projects to remediate the artisanal mining areas, sequester carbon into the soil and the plants there, and then they will be paid from carbon credits. So essentially, we're starting off the system, and then afterwards, the system carries on without input from us. So this remediates the artisanal mining damage. It gives people a local, a new livelihood. And it also means that when the mining stops from our project, then there's a continuing livelihood that goes on independent of Akobo. This is I mentioned before that the sort of Scandinavian side of things is means that we have a different way of looking at ethics to many Western companies. And the sustainable natural resources management plan that Catherine's running with the carbon credits and so on sort of enshrines our need and our desire that comes from, very deep within the company to look after people and the environment. So this is one of the reasons why I'm very excited to be working with the company and, helping to move these projects forward. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, certainly. And I was just going to go on to say, obviously, being in Scandinavia and being based out of Scandinavia and out of Norway, and you're operating in Africa, obviously it comes with particular challenges, but maybe some advantages. And I just wondered if you can just tell us a little bit about maybe some of the challenges that you are facing being based out of Norway and some of the advantages of being based there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a fascinating thing, really. I mean, many of the board of directors, for example, have been working with Etno and Akobo for quite some time now. So they have a very, very good joint understanding of Ethiopian and Scandinavian values, essentially. And I've mentioned previously that is one of the driving factors behind our very strong ESG program. But essentially, another thing which was coined by Catherine and works very well in Ethiopia is that Ethiopia is a fascinating country. I mean, it's absolutely incredible, and Ethiopians are very proud of their heritage and culture and so on. When they absolutely should be. Ethiopia is one of these countries that's really not been touched very much by colonial behaviour in the previous century, and they've kept a lot of their culture, and as such. A decision that we have taken is that we intend our company to be Ethiopian as much as it possibly can. So in Scandinavia itself, we have four employees, 3 in Norway, 1 in Sweden, and we have 38 full-time employees, rapidly growing in Ethiopia. And our intention is to take world-class methods, embed them in our team in Ethiopia. We've already hired an extremely strong team, actually, a very, very strong team in Ethiopia, many of which have international mining experience and have come back to Ethiopia. Because Ethiopia is 110 million people, there's a large diaspora that have lived outside and come back to Ethiopia. So they bring back international knowledge. And we're also bringing best practice from our engineering team in South Africa and from Norway and the UK to train up our people in Ethiopia. And what that means is that essentially we're kind of, in some ways, we're calling it post-colonialist, rather than we're trying to take all the best knowledge and experience from our Ethiopian team and taking the best international knowledge and embedding it into our team in Ethiopia. So what that means is that our team understands Ethiopian culture very, very well. We obviously have a focus on using Scandinavian ethics within the company, but we use the best possible Ethiopian people, and we build a strong team that's capable of expansion and growth in a very, very big way. And it also, before the podcast started, we mentioned a little bit about resource nationalism, and I believe very strongly that when we build up a genuinely good Ethiopian team and we invest in our Ethiopian team, that in some way it protects our investment in Ethiopia, because we're investing in the industry as a whole in Ethiopia and improving the industry as a whole in Ethiopia, and that's actually recognised very strongly by the government, the federal government in Ethiopia, and the regional government, and in the local areas as well. So that's, in many ways, that's the G in ESG. I think the often long forgotten G in ESG. We do the environment side well, we do the social side well, and our governance principles are very strong as well. And what this means essentially is we're also able to do a lot more with the funds that we have when we have a very strong Ethiopian team. And you asked about challenges, in fact, and that's an interesting one. The company kept operating at more or less the same pace as it did all the way through the COVID crisis. The bonanza grade gold was discovered just after I think it was just after the COVID crisis kicked off. And because our team is Ethiopian and they're very talented, there was no need for us to rely on expats. And likewise, there was some difficulty with a crisis in the Tigray region, which is many hundreds of kilometers from us. And as a result of that, we couldn't travel as much as we would like to Ethiopia. And nevertheless, the company kept on ramping up and improving. And so it's a very robust very robust and resilient way of running a company. So we have had challenges, definitely, but I think that because of the way in which we've geared up the company, it means that we're nicely insulated against those challenges. Nevertheless, I'm not going to tell you that it's going to be a smooth ride all the way along. We're always looking at the risks and trying to mitigate risks.
Yeah, and it never always is. So there's obviously always challenges that pop up somewhere along the line.
Absolutely, yeah.
I just wonder if you can tell us a little bit about mining in Ethiopia in terms of maybe government regulations, their mining codes. Also, obviously, the local communities where you're operating and potentially other companies are operating, and how they interact with mining companies coming into their communities, and also what is the future of mining in Ethiopia?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's a fascinating subject, to be honest. I said before, Ethiopia is 110 million people. It's the second most populous African country after Nigeria. It has, I think every economist understands that there's enormous potential for the Ethiopian economy to grow. There is, in addition to the 110 million people in the country, there's a very wide, proud diaspora which support people in Ethiopia. The country has continued to grow even through, the various challenges that have happened in the last 10 years or so. And the new government, in fact, that's been in place since 2018. I call them new because before that point there was a different group running the country. The current government has taken fantastic steps towards opening up to investment. And that was enshrined actually in our mining agreement. When we made the application for a mining license for the Segele property, we worked with the government to develop a world-class mining agreement. And I think that I think the terms that we have are very forward-looking and very positive towards investment. They accept that there are going to be some conditions in which are required to encourage investment into the country, and that's what we're seeing throughout the whole country. In fact, for a very long period, Ethiopia was quite inward-looking and insular. And for example, the telecoms company, for a long time there was only one telecoms company, and just now the second telecoms company is being developed, and that's open to competition now. And there's we're going to carry on seeing the economy growing very, very, very fast. And so that all that supports fantastic opportunity for more investment into the country. And as a result of my PhD and other work that I've done in the country, it's absolutely clear that there are enormous opportunities for exploration. We've seen copper, nickel projects, battery metals projects, even rare earth element projects in various places. And there has been some work on and off. It's come in stages. And we actually think our area around the Akobo region has the potential to be a world-class mining district, in fact. And very little modern exploration has been done specifically in that area. And there are many other zones which the same thing can be said about it. So we're very excited about what can be done in Ethiopia. And to be honest, we think we're extremely well positioned to, take part in the growth of the Ethiopian mining industry. We're also hoping to be a leading partner in it. And I emphasize the term partner because we believe that we are partners with the Ministry of Mines in assisting them and them assisting us. And we're also partners with local community as well. Yeah.
Okay, I got a couple more questions. what do you see Akakobo's strategy in, I suppose, the long term?
Yeah, so yeah, we are, we are looking to, we want to become the leading exploration and mining company in Ethiopia. I've said before, we have a fantastic team. Our general manager, Tesfaya, has experience from developing mines in other countries. And the management team we have underneath Tesfaya, all, most of them have experience from international companies. So we have a very, very strong local organization, and the international ESG standards are being embedded in the entire company. We also have very long-standing relationships as a result of being in country essentially since 2008. We've managed to continue doing all our work right the way through the COVID crisis, for example, and other challenges. And we think we're very, very well placed in order to develop our long-term vision. And I think that we have wonderful possibilities to grow. And so, in the medium term, we're looking to develop other projects. Actually, we will get fantastic cash flow from the Segele boutique mining, and we even have a lot of new targets which remain to be explored in our exploration license, which will remain a strong focus for us, regardless of what we do in other areas of the country. We're going to be working on those long-term and short-term and medium-term objectives, but obviously there's a lot of focus right now on getting the Segele mine up and running, and also developing new targets adjacent to Segele, because we have this fantastic resource, 68,000 ounces at 22 grams per ton, and we've actually haven't really scratched the surface in the few hundred meters around the Segele project. So we have a lot of work to do, and we have an organization that I really enjoy being part of, and I'm very proud of the team that we have in Ethiopia, and I think we're going to do great things in the future.
Yeah, and I was going to say, as a conclusion, what is the, I suppose, outlook and activity for the rest of 2022? And I wondered if you had any sort of final thoughts on the company, Ethiopia, or anything you may want to achieve yourself.
Yeah, sure. For the rest of the year, we've got a really exciting job getting the mining up and running. We've been negotiating for some time now a contract for purchasing the plant, the gold processing plant, and that should be completed very soon. We're also in discussion with a contract mining firm to do the underground mining. Essentially, it makes a lot of sense for us to bring in experienced mining people to operate the mine and also train the local staff in the same way as I've said before. We also have 3 drill rigs being imported into the country, 3 second-hand drill rigs, which we're going to recondition and get to work doing more exploration. So we're looking, and this will be a fantastic way to expand the resource base around Segele. We've got a lot of great work to do. Our team in Ethiopia is doing a fantastic job, and lots of exciting times happening. There was one other question you asked, wasn't it? Okay.
I was just going to say also, just wondered if, obviously the outlook for the rest of this year, but if there was anything else that you wanted to add, maybe anything personally that you want to achieve by the end of the year, or anything around the mining activities within the country.
Well, personally for me, I'm really enjoying the process of developing Segele towards mining. That's something that I'm very committed to personally, along with the rest of the company, of course. So that's where we're focusing right now. Obviously, we have other parts of the company. Johan, who's the chief exploration manager, and the geology team are doing some have some wonderful plans for greater exploration, in the wider area as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Matt, appreciate your time. Give us an overview and the future of Akobo Minerals, and obviously an outlook of Ethiopia. It's certainly an exciting time for yourself, and obviously there seems so much potential within Ethiopia. And like you said, you're probably only scratching the surface, especially with your own project, but obviously mining within Ethiopia. So wish you well for the rest of this year, and perhaps we can come on and do another podcast later this year, or beginning of next year, once you've obviously had further developments, further results. You may want to give us an update. So if our audience also wants to reach out to you, if they've got any questions that they may want to ask you, whether it's around Akobo or even mining in Ethiopia, how can they go about doing that? Are you across any social media platforms?
Yes, we're on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, of course. We have a lot of great discussions on those platforms, and we're very happy to hear from people and have more discussions. And we're very happy to. We're actually a very open company. We release results as fast as we can, and we're happy to have discussions with anyone who wants to have them. Yeah. And thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And obviously, when we were speaking just off air, you mentioned that you've just recently started listening to these podcasts.
Yeah, that's right.
you see us obviously advertising across obviously various social medias and seeing it pop up, and then you must have clicked on the button and started listening to some of the episodes. And as you said, you found them useful, educating yourself on some of the episodes that you did listen to. So for those that are listening or not even listening, appreciate if you can obviously share these episodes, and obviously in particular this episode as we're recording this, because it is this episode, or even this podcast, is to educate the wider mining community. And even Matt, as an experienced mining professional, he learned something from the episodes that you listen to. So no matter how experienced you are, hopefully you will learn something from listening to any of the episodes that we've done. We've done over 220, I think now. So just encourage you to please keep sharing and talking about the podcast, because if we can educate everyone within the mining community, it's gonna better the industry, and like I said, you're gonna learn something from these episodes. So Matt, really appreciate your time. Wish you well for 2022, and those that are listening, appreciate your continued support. Please tell everyone about this episode and the podcast, so we can get the word further out to the mining community wherever you are in the world. So until next time, happy mining.
Great. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thanks a lot, Matt.